Hello, everyone. Today I'm just gonna dig right in. Sorry about my voice. I'm pretty sick. Probably not really sick, but it sounds more dramatic that way, doesn't it? Well, I wanted to let you know about a very interesting, relatively unknown story about a missing person. Again, sorry about that, but this is a very interesting one. So, let me give you just a little bit of a background first. This was in Denmark in about 1839 ish. Um, their agricultural lands and agricultural lands comprised of 80% of the population. This was one of Denmark's greatest salvation that they need is ranching, livestock, especially cows, pigs, and poultry, became the source of wealth for a lot of people living in Denmark at the time. And this was about 1839, so just after the reign of King Frederick the Sixth. Okay, so Great Britain and other European countries largely relied on Denmark for bacon, eggs, and dairy products. So there were other manufactured items that people liked in Denmark, and that was furniture, textiles, sugar, cement, beer, porcelain, glassware, and jewelry and silverware. Jens Jensen was living in Denmark at this time. He had a wife named Maren, and then he had a son named James Sr. James was born in a little town out of High Holbæk, Georgien, Denmark, and that was October 3rd, 1832. So, right after James was born, his mother, Maren, died. And it was about a year after. For a short time, Jens raised the children alone. And then he met and married a woman named Anne Hansen, who also was a widow. She raised Karen and James, who were Jens Jensen's children. And then she had her own children, Mary, Kirsten, Hans, Andrew, Niles, Anne Margarita, and Karen Murray. So they were living in that time in that area of Denmark. So by the time he was about 30, he was baptized into the Mormon church. And this isn't about Mormons or anything like that. This is just a little bit of a background of his life. So as soon as he got baptized, he was kicked out of the family and disowned. And so he had to save up his own money and come up with his own money. And he was really sad about that. But at the same time, he had his wife and he had his children, and that gave him great joy. So Anne and Jens took the trip all the way down to Amsterdam. They lived in a house for 2 years, and this house is still standing there today. And he made his money milking cows. He was a very large man, about 6'4", about 6'5". And so he was able to milk cows at a really fast pace, and he was super, super strong. And so he earned some money to come with him and his family. So at that point, he had 5 children. And they came on to a ship, and it was a Mormon ship, LDS ship, that was predominantly owned by Mormons. And they suffered a lot of very difficult tragedies and very difficult things to come. They were actually marooned for a while on the ship. And so anyway, they had some really, really tough times. But they arrived in Salt Lake City at about, I think it was, let me double check this because I'm skipping over a ton. About 1862, when he got off of the train, him and his family were able to take a train because there was a train at that time. He found one of the missionaries that had baptized him. And there's 2 versions of this story. One of them was that he saw the missionary drunk and being a vagrant in downtown Salt Lake. And Jens Jensen being a man of not much anger, but realizing all of the things that he had to go through to get here, he punched the missionary in the face and said, "If I would have known that you would have acted like this and you had already baptized me, I never would have come to America." He said, "I would have stayed." So James Sr. Anne died. And she died of giving birth. She bled out as she was giving birth, and that is very, very common back in the 1800s. And he now, at that point, had several children. I think it was 9 at the time. And this is who we're going to talk about. Joseph, who was born in 1870 in Hiram, Utah. He is the person of interest that, or not the person of interest, but he's the person we're going to talk about. Now, so James was the child that was born when his mom died, and Jens Jensen. So James Sr. Anyway, sorry, it's confusing. So James Sr., his wife died, and within a few months he met and he married Catherine Carpenter. Now, Catherine, she already had a couple of children, and James already had 6. But oh wait, let me step back. So after some time, he had older kids that were moving up to Star Valley, Wyoming, and he had younger kids in Hiram, Utah with him. And he needed to find someone that is willing to take care of his children and keep the house clean while he went back and forth from Hiram and Star Valley all the way down to the Salt Lake Valley, because he was owning at that time a freight company. So some of his kids got married. Anyway, this is a long story. So James was very, very kind and had a really good way with children. And so after a while, he married Albina. And Albina, she had, I think, 4 kids of her own. So that made it two more children. So at this time, they had 10 children. Now, James Jensen, you can look him up in like the history of Star Valley, Wyoming. He was the first bishop and stake president of the area. Now, he loved people, and he was always very kind to everybody. And there were Native Americans that lived in the area, and he always fed them. He always wanted to make sure that they were fed. And so he would allow them to come into his home, and his wife would make extra food for them and for their children as well. And then a couple tragedies happened about that. So now, James, let's see, hang on. So James Sr. passes away, and he ended up with like, I think 15 kids or something like that. And he, to this day, has well over 2,000 descendants just from James. So James Jensen Sr., he had a son named James Jr. I know this is getting confusing. And James and Joseph, so James Jr. and Joseph were like the best of buds. They were thick as thieves. And they helped out a lot in their dad's company. And he, sorry about this, I'm going over a whole bunch. And they were all, over the Star Valley region at that point. So the James Jensen Sr., James Jr., they were all over the Star Valley area, and they were really well known between Star Valley all the way to Manaway and down to Salt Lake. They had a family of a very good reputation. So, let's see here. I'm just skipping over stuff. So, let me get to the good stuff. Okay. So there's like Jesse, where did I find that? Okay. Here's the story of Joseph Jensen. Joseph Jensen was the first son of James Jensen Sr., and he was the second, and his second wife, Henrietta Jacob Jensen. He was born on the 16th of April in 1870 in Manaway. So it was early in the spring, and it was a beautiful day. But his mother died on that day. Joseph was just a really, really sweet little boy. He was only just a tot when his mom died. He lived with friends until his father married Albina Jensen on the 26th of September, 1879. So he was about 9 years old. Now, the family was getting together, and Joseph was in school. And when Joseph was 13, he started to work. He worked as a water boy for the men that were shearing sheep in the sheep shearing shed. Say that fast 3 times. And his job was to hold the sheep still, and at the same time cut off all the wool and not cut the little lambs and sheep. This was done every spring, and then the wool grew back during the summer to keep the sheep warm all winter long. And then they would do the same thing in the spring again. Every April is kind of known as the sheep shearing season. And Joseph, in 1885, so he was about 15 years old at that time, he moved in with his brother, James Jr., and his friends, Hans Nielsen. Joseph was there in the valley, in the Star Valley, with a bunch of other men. And as the boys were just single, they would prepare for the winter, and they would help, and they helped this man named John Phillips build a house for his family. In return, they were given some home-cooked meals by Mrs. Phillips. Since there was no one else close by, they spent a lot of the time of the winter with John Phillips and his wife. People started hearing of the land being open for the homesteaders, and more people was coming into to the homes and building new homes to make a new start in America. Joseph soon had a job, and it was taking care of sheep from a company from Ogden, Utah. The name of this company is called Haley and Patterson. Joseph really missed his brother Hiram. They had been close when they were boys. When he received a letter from Hiram telling how much he was missed, Joseph went to his father, told him he was going to quit his job and go work for Hiram so they could all be together again. Hiram was a foreman for J.P. Houts. He had gone to work for this company when he was only 15 years old. He worked as an errand boy, which meant he carried water, he grated and cut potatoes and peeled them, washed tin dishes, or anything else that was needed. Sorry, I'm rocking. I'm not feeling well. So Joseph did a lot of work, and now he was a foreman. Joseph did go to work for Hiram in the fall, and when he reached Hiram's camp, his first job was to pay all of the herders who were out in the desert at Evans Basin, about 80 or 90 miles east of Casper, Wyoming. All the sheep had to be taken out of the hills in the wintertime because the heavy snow. There was not as much snow in the desert, so they could feed the sheep better there. Each year, the herders took the sheep back and forth because of winter. Joseph had 4 places to go. Hiram saw them off with money for each herder. The camps were all quite far apart. This allowed each man to watch over his sheep. Hiram saw him off in the distance. So Joseph had 4 places to go. Hiram could see him off with the money for each herder. The camps were quite far apart. This allowed each man to watch over the sheep without getting the herds mixed together. Joseph reached the first camp and gave the herder his pay. Joseph had, and then he left for the next camp to get there before dark. Joseph had a good fast horse, and he was sure to make it there before nightfall. When the second herder didn't get his pay, he rode to the camp number 1 to see if he had been paid. When he found that Joseph had been paid there 2 days ago, they decided, when he found out that Joseph had been there 2 days before, they decided that one of them should ride into Hiram's camp to see what happened. When Hiram received this word that Joseph was missing, he immediately gathered friends and started to comb the desert. His brother Lars is younger than Joseph, came from Snowville, Utah to help with the search. There were several men searching. One man that Hiram remembered very well was a good friend of Joseph. His name was Martin Thompson. They found Joseph's horse and Joseph's personal belongings. The horse was still saddled, his belongings still tied to the saddle. This was out of Granger, Wyoming. They could not find and did not find Joseph. Snow was starting to fall, and snow is really, really heavy in Star Valley. Even in the Basin Desert, in the Evans Basin Desert, it is super windy and snowy, and it's just weather there is just bonkers. So they did not find Joseph. They had to quit until the search until spring. Hiram was very sad because he felt like it was his fault that this had happened to Joseph. He also had to go back to Grover, Wyoming, until Joseph's father and stepmother, Albina, had already known that Joseph was killed. She knew the very night that he was killed. And so they had like all these search and rescues, and all this thing happened, and they could not find him anywhere. So there are 2 stories that came out of this, okay? So one of the stories is that there was a man by the name of Morgan, okay? So I'm skipping over some stuff, okay? Now this is Hiram's side of the story. Hiram worked for several sheep companies. The Crane Creek Sheep Company was only one of them. Mr. Houts had asked him to be his foreman. Hiram liked that because Mr. Houts had 4 different camps. Each camp was moved to the hills for the summer and then brought back down to the desert camp for winter. There they could feed them and keep them close by. The sheep always were straying away, and Hiram had to put a small bell on their necks so that you could hear the bell. Hiram wanted his brother to come and work for him. So he sent word to Star Valley to ask Joseph if he would come and to come back as soon as he could. Joseph quit his job as a foreman and left for Hiram's camp. They were very happy to be together again. Remember, Hiram and Joseph were just like thick as thieves. Hiram wanted Joseph to make the pay for all 4 camps. Joseph left Hiram with full instructions on where and how he was supposed to go. Joseph would reach the first camp on time, take care of the horse, rest it, and feed it before leaving for the second camp. After 2 days and the second camp had not seen Joseph, the herder, the herder went to ask the first camp if the paymaster, who was Joseph, had been there. And they found out that, so they had found out that they thought Hiram would know where Joseph was. And all the other men in the first camp thought that everybody else knew where Joseph was. This was in the late fall. Oh, here's another clue here. They found out he had paid the first camp master, but didn't make it to the second camp master. But Joseph was carrying a large amount of money, a large amount. This was the late fall of 1891, so Joseph was 21 years old, still a boy in my. So when Hiram was told that Joseph must be lost, Hiram wouldn't go for that because he was like, well, the horse would have thrown off and run him away. Little did they know at the time that Joseph had been murdered for what he was carrying, and that was the saddle on his saddle pouch was a huge amount of money. So it turned out that every man in that desert searched high and low for Joseph, but they could not find out what happened to them. In the meantime, a gunfighter named Morgan said, I got rid of one Jensen and I'll get the other one soon. But when he wasn't drunk, he would swear that he would never say that. And Morgan was found a lot of places in the Star Valley and Casper area, drinking a lot, and he was very vagrant. He would start fights. He would try to, booze up women and try to sleep with them. And he was a really, really rough character. But he did say he killed him because several others told Hiram to watch out for Morgan because Morgan was a very mean man. In the spring of 1892, so this happened in the fall, October 1891. So in the spring, September 1892, a very dear friend found a badly decomposed body of a male. Upon turning him over, he found a Copenhagen tin and a snuff box. And here, this is a horrible picture, but I was able to find it. Here was his Copenhagen, and then here was his snuff box. And that was really common back then for even Mormons to use tobacco and snuff and chew. His dad didn't know that he was chewing. This is a side note. His dad didn't know that he was chewing, and his brother came to him one day and said, Dad, Joseph is chewing. And his dad, James Jr., said, well, that's a dang nasty habit. And that's all he said. He was just like, these Jensen men were just very, very, very good and kind people. Anyway, they found the snuff box. In it was a money draft to Joseph from Haley and Patterson, from Ogden, Utah for $203. And I don't know how much that is in 1891 money or in 1892 money, but it was definitely a lot. This was his first paycheck from his last job. This good friend was Martin Thompson. He knew all the Jensen boys. He gave Hiram a $10 and the check. Hiram kept them for a long time. For years later, his friend was in Wendover, Nevada. Morgan was in a gunfight in Wendover, Nevada, and was shot and killed, but nobody would come and claim Morgan's body. And they think that the reason why was because he was just such a mean person. So Joseph, at 21, almost 22 at that time, was buried in the largest, and it says here, the largest and the loneliest in the world, out on the desert of Evan Basin. Hiram never did get over it. He always said if he hadn't asked Joseph to come back and work for him, Joseph would be alive today. Before Hiram left that part of the country, he went over to Star Valley to visit his mom and dad. His father, in the meantime, had lost his eyesight, and he barely recognized Hiram, because Hiram had grown so tall and had put on some muscles. And this was a chance before he moved. I believe he moved to Gridley, California. So this was a chance for Hiram to get reacquainted with his brothers and sisters. And he hadn't seen them for quite a long time. In those days, that was just common to not see them. However, he didn't stay long, but they talked a lot about what happened to Joseph. Hiram told them that he was going back to Snowville, but not to work for Mr. Houtz. He said that would be a fine new job, that he would find a new job, that he did working for the Morgan Sheep Company. But that's no relation to the man that had killed his brother. There's a little city in Weber County that is on the east side of behind the mountains in the Wasatch Canyon. There's a little city called Morgan, and I think that is where they did a lot. There's a lot of Danish people that had settled there, and there are a lot of there were a lot of sheep shearers, and sheep were there. So they were so happy. So they had a baby. He met and married this girl, and they had a baby. And his baby died when they were 2 years old. So, from what I gather, there's a couple of accounts, but the main thing remains the same, and that is that Joseph went missing in late autumn time, so around the late part of October of 1891. And his remains were found in 1892. And it's always been assumed that it was Morgan that had shot and killed him for the money that he had been carrying. Now, I was told that there's also a couple versions of this. I was told that he, and this is a direct descendant of Joseph Jensen, well, of James Jr. and James Sr. and Jens Jensen, direct descendant. And he has always said that the horse remained with them and that he was found dead face down in a creek. And there's another account in here about that very thing. But that's the one thing that remains. And it really broke the heart of James Jr. and his family. He was just loved so dearly. All the Jensen kids were just loved so very dearly. And so he always spoke about there was such a pain in his heart when he found that his son was murdered. And Albina, being such a dear, sweet woman, she actually mourned as much or even greater than James Jr. because she saw all of the kids as her own children. So by the end, after having all these children, and it's a his and hers situation, they had like 17 children, and most of them made it to an old age. They have a very long longevity in the Jensen side of the family. Like Christian Jensen, who was Jens Jensen's father, he lived to be like 109 or something like that. So anyway, there's really still not a whole lot known about what happened, but I found that very interesting. You can read the whole account of the Jensen family in the Grover Museum archive. It's quite a thick book. Now, I will tell you, the reason why I know this story is because my dad, who technically he's my stepfather, but I always called him Dad, he is Jensen. So his uncle was his uncle was Joseph Jensen, who died. And they had so many children that they had children from 1870 all the way up into the 1912, 1915, I believe, is when they stopped having children. But please don't make any comments about a large family. I just, that wasn't the point of it. But I wanted to give you guys a little bit of a background about family history. And so I have been doing a lot of family history research. And Utah's notorious for that. I have the world's largest, I live next to the world's largest family history library / museum in the world. It is huge. It's a beautiful building. I would love to go in there and do a lot of research, not just for my family, but for finding other people's family and seeing who they are and that kind of thing. It would be amazing to be a forensic genealogist. I think that would be just amazing. Anyway, I hoped you enjoyed this story. If any of you are descendants of Jens Jensen down to James Jensen Jr. and Sr., and any of you know any part of the story, has been to Star Valley, Wyoming, and know this story, go ahead and leave a comment down. I would like to hear your take on it. I find it really interesting and just really fascinating that we have this unsolved mystery as to exactly what happened. Sadly, they could not put Morgan into jail or prison because they just did not have the proof. There was just too much hearsay about it. So anyway, I I leave you today with a lot of love and light. I hope that your week is just absolutely fabulous. And I'll be coming back in a couple days because I have a couple of really cool stories that I want to share. And I missed last week, so I'll probably do a makeup sometime in this, in the next couple of days. I just don't want you guys to think that my throat hurts. It's just, it's not sore. I'm just like, it's super dry and I have a congested head, but my body aches. So who knows what kind of flu it is, but I'll be fine. I'll be okay. Well, you guys have a wonderful, wonderful day. Have a great rest of your weekend, and I will see you soon. Oh, and by the way, thank you so much for subscribing. I have, I believe, 88 subscribers now. Just 2 weeks ago, I only had 82. Well, not only, but I had 82 just a couple of weeks ago. Thank you so much for subscribing. And if you are watching this channel, please hit a like. Please comment if you would like. If you feel compelled to comment, go ahead and comment. And go ahead and subscribe. I see a lot of people coming in but not subscribing. I am going to be changing a lot of facets to this channel. It's just going to take some time. But I'm really excited about some of the things that I have in mind. And I hope everybody just has a wonderful day. Thank you. Bye.